So in this image, you can see both the cranium and the facial bones. So what I would like to do is to list the bones that are cranial bones. So this bone right here that is in yellow, this would be the frontal bone, and there is only one of those. We also have on the sides, we have what are called parietal bones. And interesting, when we talk about the bones of the skull, next quarter, when you learn about the brain, you're going to find that the frontal bone, that is where the frontal lobe of the brain sits. And then we have the parietal lobes sitting underneath the parietal bone. So these have the same name as the lobes of your brain. So we have parietal bones, and you'll see in your book they put a 2 there, right? Parietal bones. And then we also, if we turned this skull to the back, we would see that the back of the skull is the occipital bone, and there is just one of those. And then on the sides, think about when you're rubbing your temples, those would be the temporal bones. Now inside, we actually have two bones that are difficult to see. One place that we see them is in this dark pink, and we see the dark pink, so it kind of makes up part of the orbits. You'll also notice that there's like little fissures and canals here, and this is actually where blood vessels run. We also have the optic nerve from the eye travels through a canal. And so these holes in the skull just allow things to enter and to exit the brain. So the two bones that are difficult to see are the sphenoid bone, and there's only one of those, and then the ethmoid bone. So the sphenoid bone is what we refer to as the butterfly-shaped bone. And it can be seen when you look at the inside of the skull. If you remove the top of the cranium and you're looking down, that's where you can see that butterfly shape. And then the ethmoid bone makes up part of our sinuses, and it also extends down and makes up part of our nasal, the separation between the two sides of our nasal cavity. And so this would be the ethmoid bone right here. But it is considered a cranial bone because it also does extend up into the cranium, and it connects to the meninges right where you have the two hemispheres of the brain. So these are the cranial bones. Now we can also look at the facial bones. So we already talked about the maxilla and the mandible. We have a bone right here, which makes up your cheekbone. This whole structure right here is called your zygomatic arch. But this part of the facial structure, this in blue, is actually the zygomatic bone. So we have two of those zygomatic bones. So we'll put two there. And then if you look at these, we have the nasal bones right here in this dark blue. So we have nasal bones. You'll also see that we have in our skull, we have a lacrimal bone. And so the lacrimal bone is actually here in this green structure right here. So this is my lacrimal bone. There's two of them. This is lacrimal glands produce tears. And so like if you were to put your fingers into the inside of your orbit and you kind of can feel that, that is where the tear duct drains the tears from your eyes. There's a duct that drains it and into your nose. And so that is the lacrimal bones, or those are the lacrimal bones. When you look at those lacrimal bones in a real skull, oftentimes they're so delicate that they get broken out. And so sometimes you don't see those. We also see parts of the ethmoid bone there as well. So this is, they're saying this is also ethmoid, as well as the ethmoid bone that would be located right here. Okay. We have another bone that comes up from the bottom of the nose. This is a very short, small bone, and this is called the vomer bone. And there is only one of those vomer bones. Okay, so those are the facial bones that you need to know. We're going to talk about these structures in here. These are the conchae, and the conchae actually help to create turbulence in the air as you breathe it in. And so those would be the conchae. So when you look at this structure right here, this whole thing is what is referred to as the perpendicular plate. And the perpendicular plate is where we have a piece of the ethmoid bone coming down, and it is connecting to the vomer bone. So sometimes when we look at structures, like say, for example, the zygomatic arch, it doesn't just consist of one particular bone, but it actually consists of parts of bones articulating with one another. So let's look at a diagram from the side. Okay. So let's just use the example of the zygomatic arch. So this is not a bone. This is kind of like a bone marking, but it also is significant because it consists of two bones. So we could say that it consists of the zygomatic bone, articulating with, comes together with the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Okay, so this is my zygomatic process of my temporal bone, and it is articulating with the zygomatic bone, and that is what makes up the zygomatic arch. So if I asked you on a test, what makes up the zygomatic arch, you would have to pick both of those, right? So this is actually, the zygomatic process is actually a bone marking. This whole bone right here is called the temporal bone. Just this part of the temporal bone is called the zygomatic process. And then this whole bone here would be your zygomatic bone.